The morning mist clung to the valley like smoke from a distant fire, wrapping Marcus Thompson's farm in a shroud of silver-gray silence. At 53 years old, Marcus moved through his tomato rows with the deliberate care of someone who understood that the earth kept its own time. His weathered hands, thick as fence posts and just as sturdy, cradled each vine with unexpected gentleness. The soil beneath his boots was still damp from last night's rain, releasing that particular scent of promise and decay that only farmers truly understand. He didn't hear them coming at first. The rumble of engines broke through the morning's meditation like stones thrown into still water. 3 trucks, moving too fast for the narrow dirt road that wound past his property line. Marcus straightened slowly, his 6'2" frame unfolding with the measured patience of someone whose body had learned to conserve its movements. At 280 pounds, he'd long ago stopped apologizing for the space he occupied in the world. The weight sat on him like armor now, distributed across shoulders that had once carried 100-pound packs through Afghan mountains, across a chest that had learned to hold its breath for 3 minutes underwater during SEAL training in Coronado. But the men climbing out of those trucks didn't know any of that. They saw only what Marcus had trained them to see. A heavy-set black man in mud-stained overalls, alone on 40 acres of prime Tennessee farmland. They saw opportunity. They saw an easy mark. They saw everything except the truth. Marcus watched them approach through the morning haze, counting their numbers, noting their positions, cataloging the telltale bulges beneath ill-fitting jackets. His fingers found the worn wooden handle of his hoe, not in threat, but in comfort. The same way they'd once found the grip of an M4 carbine in Fallujah, the same way they'd found purchase on cliff faces in the Hindu Kush. 7 years he'd been farming this land. 7 years of deliberate invisibility, of choosing seeds over bullets, of nurturing life instead of taking it. But some choices, Marcus was about to remember, aren't really choices at all.
Marcus Thompson had discovered the truth about silence during his 3rd tour in Afghanistan. Not the absence of sound, that was just quiet. Real silence was something deeper, something you cultivated in the spaces between your heartbeats when you were lying prone on a ridgeline, watching a convoy wind through the valley below. It was the silence that lived in your muscles when you held perfectly still for hours, becoming part of the landscape itself. That silence had followed him home to Tennessee. The farm had been his therapist's idea, though she'd never put it quite that bluntly. "You need something living," Dr. Patel had said during one of their sessions at the VA. "Something that depends on you for the right reasons." Marcus had laughed at that, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. 22 years in the Navy SEALs had taught him plenty about things depending on him. The difference was, tomatoes didn't scream when they were dying. Corn didn't leave wives and children behind. He'd bought the 40 acres with his retirement pay and a disability settlement he'd never wanted to file for. The land had been neglected, its previous owner lost to foreclosure and methamphetamines, twin plagues that seemed to follow each other through rural America like cause and effect. Marcus had seen promise in the mild slope of its hills, the way the creek cut through the eastern border, the richness of soil that just needed someone to care again. The locals had been skeptical at first. Bardstown, Tennessee, population 3,847, wasn't exactly known for its diversity. Marcus was one of maybe a dozen black faces in the entire county, and certainly the only one who'd chosen to farm. The first few months had been thick with sideways glances and conversations that stopped when he entered the feed store. But Marcus had a gift for becoming invisible when he wanted to, for making himself seem smaller than his considerable bulk suggested. He spoke softly, moved slowly, smiled often. He bought his supplies locally, hired local kids for harvest, donated produce to the church food bank, even though he hadn't set foot in a church since Kandahar. People began to forget he was different. He became part of the landscape, as unthreatening as the old oak tree that shaded his front porch. "Mr. Marcus," the kids would call out when they rode their bikes past his fence line. He'd wave, sometimes toss them fresh peaches or sweet corn, depending on the season. The transformation had been deliberate, calculated with the same precision he'd once applied to mission planning. Every morning, he'd wake up at 0500 hours, though he had trained himself to think of it as 5 o'clock now, civilian time, for a civilian life. He'd make coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe, stand on his porch and watch the sun climb over the eastern ridge. Then he'd tend to his crops with the methodical attention of someone who understood that life and death often hinged on the smallest details. His hands, which had once been registered as lethal weapons in 3 different countries, learned the delicate art of pruning. His eyes, trained to spot IEDs and snipers, learned to identify aphids and blight. His body, scarred by shrapnel and bullets, found a different kind of strength in the rhythm of seasonal labor.
Tyler Briggs fancied himself a businessman. That's what he called it when he explained his operations to new recruits, usually kids barely out of high school with nowhere else to turn. "We're entrepreneurs," he'd say, flashing the gold teeth he'd had installed after his first big score. "We identify opportunities, we maximize profits, we eliminate competition." The opportunity he'd identified in Marcus Thompson's farm was too good to pass up. 40 acres of fertile land, perfect for the kind of cultivation that had nothing to do with tomatoes. The old farmer was alone, no family, no workers living on site. Better yet, he was black, in a county where that still meant something to the wrong people. Who would care if he disappeared? Who would ask questions? Tyler had sent scouts first, kids on dirt bikes who'd cruise the property line, testing boundaries. Marcus had watched them from his kitchen window, noting their patterns, their numbers, the way they'd gotten bolder over time. He'd seen this kind of reconnaissance before, in places where the stakes had been much higher. But he'd done nothing, said nothing. He'd learned long ago that violence was like a virus. Once you let it in, it spread to everything it touched. The morning they finally came, Marcus was checking his irrigation lines. The drought had been hard on everyone, but Marcus had been smart about water conservation, using techniques he'd learned during desert warfare adapted for agriculture. His tomatoes were thriving while neighboring farms struggled. Maybe that's what had finally pushed Tyler to act. Success had a way of making you a target. "Morning, friend." Tyler's voice carried across the field like a bad omen. He was younger than Marcus had expected, maybe 30, with the kind of lean, hungry build that suggested speed over strength, the kind of man who'd never been truly tested. 6 others flanked him, spread in what they probably thought was an intimidating formation, but what Marcus recognized as poor tactical spacing. Too close together, no one watching their 6. Marcus continued working, not looking up. "Morning." "Nice place you got here." Tyler moved closer, his boots crushing tomato seedlings Marcus had planted just that week. Deliberate, provocative. "Must be lonely, though, working it all by yourself." "I manage." "I bet you do." Tyler was close enough now that Marcus could smell him, cigarettes and cheap cologne failing to mask the sour smell of methamphetamine sweat. "Thing is, friend, this land could be managing a lot more. You're what, growing tomatoes? Corn? That's subsistence shit. This land could be worth real money." Marcus finally looked up, his eyes meeting Tyler's with the flat calm of still water. "I'm not interested in selling." Tyler laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Who said anything about selling?" The first punch came from the left, one of Tyler's boys trying to sucker punch the old farmer while he was distracted. Marcus saw it coming in his peripheral vision, the telegraph of shifted weight and drawn breath that preceded amateur violence. Time dilated the way it always did, that familiar slowing that had saved his life more times than he could count. He could have dodged, could have countered, could have put the kid down in 3 moves that would have left him breathing through tubes. Instead, Marcus took the hit. The blow caught him in the ribs, sending him stumbling but not falling. Let them think he was weak. Let them think he was exactly what he appeared to be. The kid who'd thrown the punch, couldn't be more than 19, was grinning, bouncing on his toes like a boxer. "Not so tough now, are you, old man?" The kid moved in for another shot. Marcus counted heartbeats. 1, 2. On 3, he shifted his weight just enough that the second punch glanced off his shoulder instead of landing square. He grunted, sold the impact, let himself fall to one knee in the dirt between his tomato rows. "Here's the thing," Tyler said, squatting down to Marcus's eye level. "This land is going to make money one way or another. You can be part of that, or you can be in the way of it. Your choice." Marcus's fingers found the soil cool and damp against his skin. He thought about all the men he'd known who'd mistaken kindness for weakness, quiet for fear, restraint for inability. Most of them were dead now. "I need you to leave my property." "Or what?" Tyler stood and gestured to his crew. "You're going to call the sheriff? Good luck with that. Sheriff Hayes and I have an understanding. You're going to fight us? Look at yourself, man. You're old, you're fat, you're alone. No one's coming to save you." Marcus rose slowly, his knees protesting. 280 pounds was a lot to lift even for someone who'd once been able to do one-arm pull-ups. But that weight was deceptive. Beneath the layer of softness that 7 years of civilian life had added, the muscle remained, the training remained, the knowledge of exactly how fragile human bodies really were.
"I'm asking you nicely to leave." Tyler's face twisted into something ugly. "Drag him to the barn!" They came at him all at once, which was their first mistake. In close-quarters combat, numbers could be a disadvantage if you didn't know how to use them. Marcus let them grab him, let them think they were controlling the situation. 6 sets of hands pulling him toward the old barn he used for equipment storage. He memorized their positions, their grips, their breathing patterns. The one on his left had a bad knee. He was favoring it. The one on his right kept reaching for something in his waistband. A knife, probably, or a small pistol. Tyler walked ahead, confident in his victory. The barn was dark, dusty with decades of hay and neglect. They shoved Marcus inside, forming a loose circle around him. Tyler pulled out a pistol. A Glock 19, Marcus noted automatically. Probably never properly maintained, judging by the wear on the slide. "Last chance, old man. You sign over the deed or things get unpleasant." Marcus centered himself. In the SEALs, they'd called it finding your zero. That perfect point of balance between thought and action, between violence and restraint. He found it now, in a barn in Tennessee, surrounded by boys who thought they were monsters. "You know what the difference is between a warrior and a killer?" Marcus asked, his voice quiet enough that they had to lean in to hear him. Tyler smirked. "What's that?" "A warrior knows when not to fight." The silence that followed was pregnant with possibility. Marcus could see the moment Tyler decided to escalate, the tightening around his eyes, the slight lift of the pistol. That was the moment Marcus had been waiting for. The moment when the choice was no longer his. He moved. 22 years of muscle memory took over, the gun hand first, a simple redirection that sent the Glock spinning into the hay. The throat second, not a killing strike, just enough to drop Tyler gasping to his knees. The third movement was already flowing as the others reached for weapons, as their brains tried to process what had just happened to their leader. Marcus didn't fight them so much as he moved through them. Every strike was calculated for maximum effect with minimal permanent damage. A broken wrist here to disarm, a displaced knee there to immobilize, a blood choke held just long enough to induce unconsciousness, but not death. It was brutal in its efficiency, beautiful in its economy of motion. 43 seconds. That's how long it took to neutralize 6 armed men. Marcus had counted, because counting kept him grounded, kept him from going too far, kept him from becoming the thing he'd left behind in Afghanistan. Tyler was trying to crawl toward his gun, gasping through his bruised larynx. Marcus picked up the Glock, ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber. The movements were automatic, performed without conscious thought. "You want to know what I did before I became a farmer? No, I don't think you do. I think you want to forget this ever happened. I think you want to take your boys, get them medical attention, and find somewhere else to do business." Tyler's eyes were wide with fear now, the kind of primal terror that comes from realizing you have fundamentally misunderstood the nature of reality. Marcus squatted down, his voice soft. "I've done things that would make your worst nightmares look like children's stories. I've been the monster that monsters fear. And I came here to leave all that behind.
to grow things instead of destroy them, to be alone with my ghosts. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Tyler nodded frantically. "Good. Because if you come back, if you even think about coming back, I'll stop being retired. And trust me, son, you don't want to see what that looks like." Marcus helped Tyler to his feet, almost gentle now. One by one, he checked on the others. Dislocated joints were relocated, pressure points were released. He worked with the clinical detachment of a medic, which, in a way, he'd also been. The funny thing about violence, Marcus said as he worked, though he wasn't sure if any of them were conscious enough to hear him, is that it's like farming. It's all about timing. Plant too early and frost kills everything. Plant too late and there's not enough time to grow. Violence is the same. Too early and you become the aggressor. Too late and you become the victim. The trick is knowing exactly when to act. When they were all mobile enough to move, Marcus walked them to their trucks. Tyler couldn't meet his eyes, his hands shaking as he fumbled for his keys. "One more thing," Marcus said, leaning into the driver's window. "That sheriff you mentioned, Hayes, you might want to reconsider that arrangement. I knew a Hayes in Afghanistan. Good man. His younger brother's the sheriff here. They talk every Sunday. Family dinner. Funny how small the world is." The trucks disappeared down the dirt road, kicking up dust that hung in the morning air like a bad memory. Marcus watched until they were out of sight, and then longer still, making sure they weren't doubling back. Old habits.
When he was satisfied they were gone, he walked back to his tomato field. Several plants had been trampled in the scuffle. He knelt beside them, assessing the damage. Some could be saved with careful attention. Others were beyond help. That was the nature of things. You saved what you could, mourned what you couldn't, and kept moving forward. His hands were shaking slightly as he worked to stake up a damaged plant. Adrenaline aftermath. It had been 7 years since he'd moved like that. 7 years since he'd felt that particular cocktail of chemicals flooding his system. He'd hoped never to feel it again. But hoping and reality were often different things. As the sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist, Marcus continued his work. By noon, news of what had happened would spread through the county like wildfire. The story would grow in the telling, become something more than what it was. But Marcus wouldn't be around to hear it. He had irrigation lines to check, tomatoes to tend, a life to continue living. That evening, as the sun set behind the western hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Marcus sat on his porch with a glass of sweet tea. The ice clinked gently as his hands finally stopped shaking. Somewhere in the distance, a mockingbird ran through its repertoire of stolen songs. The phone rang inside the house. He let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. On the third call, he answered. "Mr. Thompson?" The voice was nervous, young. "This is Sheriff Hayes. I wanted to... That is, I heard there might have been some trouble out your way today." "No trouble, Sheriff. Just a misunderstanding." There was a pause. "My brother speaks highly of you. Says you saved his unit more than once." "Your brother exaggerates." "Maybe so. Still, I wanted you to know that if you ever have any misunderstandings, you call me direct. This is my personal number." Marcus took down the number, though they both knew he'd never use it. Men like Marcus Thompson didn't call for help. They were the help that others called. "Sheriff?" "Yes, sir?" "The Briggs gang won't be a problem anymore, for anyone." Another pause, longer this time. "I appreciate that information, Mr. Thompson. You have a good evening." Marcus ended the call and returned to his porch, to his tea, to his silence. The mockingbird had moved on, and the night insects were beginning their chorus. Crickets and cicadas, the soundtrack of southern summers. He sat and listened, letting the sounds wash over him, grounding him in the present.
3 months passed before Marcus saw Tyler Briggs again. It was at the farmer's market in town, of all places. Marcus was selling his late summer tomatoes, the big beefsteaks that had finally ripened after weeks of careful tending. He was weighing out 3 pounds for Mrs. Chen, the owner of the Chinese restaurant on Main Street, when he spotted Tyler across the square. Tyler was thinner, cleaner. The gold teeth were gone, replaced with normal ones. He was working the Salvation Army booth, serving free lemonade to kids while their parents shopped. When their eyes met across the crowded market, Tyler froze. Marcus finished with Mrs. Chen, then walked over. Tyler's hands were shaking as he poured lemonade for a little girl with pigtails. "Mr. Thompson," Tyler's voice was barely above a whisper. "Tyler," Marcus accepted a cup of lemonade, tasted it. "Too much sugar." "Yeah, kids like it sweet." Tyler was trying not to stare at Marcus's hands, those same hands that had dismantled his entire crew without breaking a sweat. "You're looking better." Tyler touched his jaw unconsciously where the bruising had long since faded. Clean for 91 days, got a sponsor, got a job, trying to make amends. Marcus nodded. He understood about amends, about trying to balance the ledger of violence with acts of service. His own ledger would never balance, but that didn't stop him from trying. "The others?" "Scattered. Most of them got clean too. That thing you did, it scared us straight, I guess. Made us realize we weren't as tough as we thought." "Nobody is," Marcus said. "That's the first lesson." "What's the second?" Marcus considered the question, watching children run between the booths, their laughter bright as sunshine. "That strength isn't about what you can do, it's about what you choose not to do." Tyler was quiet for a moment. "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For not killing us. We came to your place with guns, threatened you. You had every right." "Rights and choices are different things," Marcus interrupted. "I chose to be a farmer. That means choosing life over death, even when it's harder." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the market flow around them. Finally, Tyler spoke again. "My sponsor says I need to make direct amends to the people I've wronged. I don't know how to make amends to you, what I did, what I tried to do." Marcus turned to face him fully. "You want to make amends? Live better, be better, help people instead of hurt them. That's all any of us can do." Tyler's eyes were wet. "Yes, sir." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder, gentle but firm. "And Tyler, that land you wanted, I'm starting a program teaching veterans how to farm, therapy through agriculture. I could use someone who knows the county, knows the people who might need help but won't ask for it." "You'd trust me with that?" "I'd trust the man you're becoming. The man you were is dead. Let him stay that way." Marcus walked back to his booth, leaving Tyler to process the offer. By the end of the market day, he'd sold all his tomatoes and most of his sweet corn. As he loaded empty crates into his truck, Tyler approached again. "I'll do it. The veteran program. I'll help however I can." Marcus nodded. "Monday morning, 5:30. Don't be late." That evening, Marcus stood in his field as the sun set, surveying his land with the satisfaction of a man who'd fought for peace and found it. The corn stood tall and green, ready for harvest. The tomato plants were heavy with fruit. The earth was healing, and so was he.
He thought about the letter he'd received that week from Dr. Patel, asking how he was doing. He'd write back tomorrow, tell her about the veteran program, about choosing creation over destruction. He wouldn't mention Tyler and this gang. Some stories didn't need to be told. As darkness settled over the farm, Marcus made his final rounds, checking gates, testing locks, securing the perimeter. Old habits died hard, but maybe they didn't need to die at all. Maybe they just needed to be redirected, like violence into protection, fear into caution, warriors into farmers. The stars emerged one by one, mapping out constellations he'd learned to navigate by in the desert. But he wasn't in the desert anymore. He was home, on his 40 acres, surrounded by growing things and the promise of tomorrow's harvest. In the distance, a screech owl called out, its eerie wail cutting through the night. Some would call it ominous, but Marcus knew better. The owl was hunting, doing what nature designed it to do. There was no malice in it, no cruelty.
just purpose. Just like him. Marcus Thompson, former Navy SEAL, current farmer, protector of seeds and second chances, walked back to his house. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, aphids to battle, drought to manage, young veterans to teach. But tonight, there was peace. And for a warrior who'd seen too much war, peace was the only victory that mattered. The story of Marcus Thompson raises a question that each of us must answer in our own lives. When faced with the choice between violence and restraint, between proving our power and preserving our peace, what do we choose? We live in a world that often rewards aggression, that mistakes kindness for weakness, that pushes us to demonstrate our strength through dominance. But what if true strength looks different? What if it looks like Marcus in his tomato field, choosing to take a punch he could have easily avoided? What if it looks like offering redemption to someone who came to destroy you? Every day we encounter our own versions of Tyler Briggs, people who threaten our peace, who challenge our carefully constructed calm, who make us want to unleash capabilities we've kept hidden. Maybe it's a coworker who undermines us, a neighbor who disrespects us, a system that oppresses us. The temptation is always there to reveal our full power, to destroy rather than disable, to punish rather than protect. But Marcus Thompson's story suggests another way, a way where strength serves wisdom, where capability comes with responsibility, where the greatest victory is the fight you don't have. Consider the battles you're facing right now, the conflicts that keep you awake at night, the people who've wronged you, the injustices that make your blood boil. What would it look like to approach them with Marcus's philosophy? Not with weakness or submission, but with the confident restraint of someone who knows their own power and chooses carefully when to use it. The truth is, we all have more power than we realize. Maybe not the kind of physical prowess Marcus possessed, but power nonetheless. The power to destroy reputations with words, the power to withhold forgiveness, the power to escalate conflicts until they consume everything around them. But having power and using it wisely are vastly different things. So here's the question to carry with you. In your next confrontation, your next moment of testing, will you be the warrior who knows when not to fight? Will you be the person who chooses growth over destruction, who plants seeds instead of salt in the earth? Think about that as you go about your day. Think about the Tyler Briggs who might be waiting for redemption instead of retribution. Think about the tomatoes that could grow where violence once threatened to take root. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you reconsider the nature of strength and the power of restraint, consider subscribing to hear more stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary choices. Stories about the moments that define us, not by what we do, but by what we choose not to do. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can be is a farmer in a field, growing life where others expected death.